Hello my tarot friends, today I'm doing a VR2 Feeding My Soul 1212 and this is a VR to her hashtag called I've Got a Deck for That. I watched a few videos on YouTube that people created and I think this is a very fun tag to do, so let's just dive into it, shall we? So the first prompt is a deck that represents a movie genre. My favorite movie genre is sci-fi, but sci-fi with a spiritual twist to it. So something that is out of this world, but it has something deep about it. Like there's gonna be some deeper spiritual meaning behind it. How should I explain this? I don't like movies where it's sci-fi but it's about fighting the aliens, if that makes sense. Like that doesn't have any deep purpose, that's just pure hate, I don't like that. I like things like Star Wars, for example. It has a very deep meaning and the characters really develop through the series. Or I like even E.T. or Leave the World Behind, which is a new movie on Netflix. It's absolutely incredible if you haven't watched it yet. So yeah, I struggled to find a deck that would represent that, but I went with the Tarot, and I chose this deck because it is very abstract, and I feel even though it doesn't represent, extraterrestrial life or out of this world things, it's just very abstract and I feel it has something spiritual about it. It feels outer worldly. It feels like these people on it could be beings from different worlds or different planets. Some of them, of course, not all of them. But yeah, it just feels super creative and abstract, and it has a very deep meaning. Every card, obviously, it's tarot. But just like my favorite type of movies, they need to have something deep about them. I like movies that make me think about them like for next few months to come, that I'm still finding new meanings in the things that happened. I would think about the movie and then I'd be like, oh my god, that also represents this and this, or means this and this. So yeah, that type of movies, I love them. Also a bit thrillery sometimes, thrillers, but not scary movie stuff, but just like things that are so deep that go into the shadow maybe of things, perhaps as well. And I feel in this deck you can find that too. So yeah, this is the Tarot and represents my favorite movie genre. The next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite movie. And for me, that is Avatar. I know that people probably don't see this movie as very deep because it does have a lot of Hollywood things in it. I'm not gonna argue that at all, but if you look really deep into the meanings of what it actually meant when, the humans went onto that planet, Pandora, and when they, destroyed that planet for resources, which is literally what we are doing to our planet. Not only the beings in this deck, so Lemurians, remind me of the Na'vi from Avatar. Also, I heard the theory that James Cameron actually connected to the energies of Lemuria and Atlantis in order to get the ideas of how the world worked in that times. I'm not sure, of course, if that is true, but it would make sense, in my opinion, if that actually happened. So the whole movie to me holds that energy of Lemuria and Atlantis, and this deck is all about that energy and the messages that Lemurians have for us. It is a channeled deck, so the author, Lizzie Ivy, basically connected to Lemurians and they channeled the messages and the paintings through her. This deck is just so unbelievably amazing and deep and super spiritual, but also still very practical. It's incredible. I know some people complain because of the borders, but that doesn't really bother me at all, to be honest with you. It is just so good, this deck. But yeah, the second Avatar movie, The Way of Water, I found even more incredible than the first one, because I love water. I love water, and I just, oh my gosh, I can't, it's too good to me to be able to put the feelings that I get or the feels that I get when I watch that movie. I watched it probably like 5 times already because it just takes me into that world, and the way that the peoples are connected to the nature of their planet and their animals and the spirit is just so beautiful. And yeah, it's just, this deck is a perfect representation of the energy of that movie. Of course, if you take the Hollywood part of it out, basically my favorite parts are where we don't have the fighting and the bombs and all that crap that comes with the Hollywood stuff. But yeah, next category is a deck that represents your favorite color. And surprise, surprise, my favorite color is green, forest green specifically. And what a better deck to choose than the Enchanted Forest Tarot. This deck is so green. Like, I think 3/4 of these cards have like the majority of the color in them is green. And I absolutely love that. Maybe this is one thing that drew me to this deck as well. Of course, the magics of the forest and the energies of the forest and the fae people and Celtic vibe as well. But the color as well. Look at these dancing bears. It is so green and beautiful and calming. And green is associated with the heart chakra, and I feel this deck really helps you heal some wounds in your heart, because it is not just a nice magical deck, it's also a deck that helps you look into your shadow and pain, you know, and hurt. It could easily be also a blue deck, I'm gonna say, related to the throat chakra, because it is a very honest deck that communicates things very well and truthfully. But yeah, this is the deck that represents my favorite color, which is the color green. The Enchanted Forest Tarot. Next category is a deck that represents your childhood self. I chose 2 decks here and I will explain why. The first one is Tarot for the Great Outdoors, and I chose this deck because I was outside all the time when I was a child. And when I say all the time, I mean all the time. I was climbing the trees, I was digging the holes, I was searching for animals, bugs, talking to them. I remember I would be like so young, maybe 6, 7, and I'd ask my mom if I can just wander into the forest for the day, and she said, yeah, as long as you come back for lunch. And that was the time when we didn't have phones. And I'm like, wow, my mom really trusted that I'm gonna be fine. She trusted the forest and she trusted me, and I was fine. I felt very safe outside. In the nature, and this deck really represents that feeling, like being comfortable outside and being one with nature and reciprocity with nature. It is just so absolutely gorgeous, and it really reminds me of my childhood times. And that's why I love using it, because through this deck I can talk to my inner child, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is Tarot for the Great Outdoors, an absolute gem on the market in my opinion, as it's also a mass market deck. And the next deck that I put into the same category is the Shadowscapes Tarot, and I put this here as well because as a child, and when I say a child I mean like until I was, I don't know, 12, I suppose. I was a very creative, expressive, always in the dreams. What is it called? With fairies, they call people like that. People who are with fairies. Child. I would be writing my imaginative stories. I would be talking to animals. To me, it feels like I connected with beings, fairies or fae, from this 5th dimension, which in my opinion this deck represents. It represents like a different universe, different level of consciousness, different dimension, I'm even gonna say. Very dreamy and fantasy-like world. So I feel like I connected to that very easily when I was a child and used it to talk to animals, to connect with nature, to create and write stories, and I was writing poems as well. In my late childhood I started. Of course this continued then in my teenage years, so this deck could also be in that category, but I chose 2 different decks for that. But yeah, this is another of the decks that represent my childhood. The next category is a deck that represents my teenage self, and again I chose 2. Now I'm gonna explain why. Firstly, I'm gonna talk about the Modern Love Tarot. Now, I don't know why, for what reason, but in my teenage years, and when I say teenage years, I mean like 15 to 19, so my later teenage years, people would come to me for love advice every single day. Like, literally, I was known in my friend groups as a love therapist. They literally called me that, and I don't know why. I gave them advice and it worked. And how I got that advice, it's like I connected and channeled some sort of advice from the above. It's really hard to explain, because obviously in your teenage years you don't have that huge experience. I mean, maybe it helped that my parents were happily married and still are to this day. Like, they're two people that are most in love and they're still like holding hands and being all lovely-dovely. It's quite incredible, I'm gonna say. So I was very, very lucky, and I'm grateful that I had that type of relationship model in front of my eyes. So maybe that's why, I don't know. But yeah, this is the deck that represents that, because I use this deck for love readings, relationship readings, and obviously people come to you when there's something wrong and they want advice. So yeah, this is the deck that represents that part of my teenage self, the love therapist, although by no means I was or am a love therapist. If I could go back in time, I would probably go and study something like that, to be honest, because I love relationships and I love human psychology so much. Anyway, the second deck that I chose to represent my teenage self is Tarot, and that is because specifically in my teenage years, like I was saying before, I was writing poetry and I was writing music and songs and love songs, you know, songs related to relationships and pain, and also later on, obviously, happiness in relationships. But Tarot is the deck that is based on Frida Kahlo's life, or the way she perceived or lived her life. And she was a very expressive, honest, truthful, authentic person that was unapologetically herself. And she was expressing that, you know, in her paintings, in her work. And I feel, because I was writing, you know, my poetry and my songs and lyrics and stuff, this deck kind of represents a similar idea, I'm gonna say, just through a different medium, right? This is paintings, and Frida was painting, and I was writing and singing as well. I was not just writing, by the way. I was also singing and performing, and that continued in my adult life as well. But you know, it started then. I loved performing so much. Like, I was joining these musical contests. Yeah, people always encouraged me to just become a professional musician or whatever, but I decided not to, and I'm happy, because music industry is, at least in my opinion, of course, it is not good. So anyway, this is Tarot, an absolute gem on the market. Unfortunately, it's not mass market, but you never know. The next category is a deck that represents my adult self, and again I chose two decks. I'm sorry, I'm layered, I can't just choose one deck. So one is the Mary L. Tarot. Why I chose this deck is because as an adult I love digging deep within. I love exploring the depths of my soul. I love wandering into my shadow, into the traumas, into, more than that, also the positive side of all what I just said, but also connecting to my ancestors and my previous lifetimes. And this deck allows me to do all these things. And also, it's fucking gorgeous. I mean, look at it. It's just so beautiful, artistically beautiful. I catch my breath every time I look at these paintings. They're so out of this world. I mean, this is one of my favorite cards in this deck. It's just so beautiful. And yeah, it's just, I don't have words to describe this deck, really. I feel like when I use this deck for the work I was talking about, I just have to look at the pictures and I will know what they're trying to tell me. You know, I don't need the book. Although I go and refer to the book, of course, because it's interesting to get the deeper meaning of the cards, but they just speak for themselves, really. It is so amazing. So this is the deck that helps me explore the depths of my soul. The next part of my adult self that can be represented in a deck is the part of me that is connected to nature, that loves to study everything that has to do with life. which is plants, animals, spirituality, in my opinion. And this deck allows me to tap into the plant medicine energies and to learn the history about it, which then connects me to my ancestors and my previous lifetimes as well, like the Mary L, but in a more studious, knowledge-wise way. And this deck also is connected to astrology, which is always have been a huge fascination and love of mine. Because of that, it is also connected to tarot. So this deck is just everything, and you have animals in it as well. So I feel all my interests are expressed in this deck, and it's just so good. Like this, I love it so much. I love it so much. I remember when I was looking at the artwork, I wasn't completely sure because I love the artwork, but it's a little bit maybe dark. And usually I'm more drawn to very bright colors. These colors feel a bit more muted. It is incredible. And I love the fact that it talks about the plants that are controversial, let's say, like cannabis or mushrooms or ayahuasca and stuff like that. So I absolutely love this deck. And it's so unapologetically itself as well, which I am too. You know, when you become an adult, you just don't care anymore what others think or feel about you. I mean, not in a negative way, like in empowering way. Not that you become a head, but you know, I think you understand what I'm trying to say here. Anyways, this deck represents all the things that I talked about just now. So, another deck for my adult self. The next category is your favorite music genre or your favorite song. Well, how can I say this? I love so many music genres that it's impossible to choose one. Also, it's impossible to choose my favorite song. I mean, I'm a musical person since forever. Like, my mom told me I sang before I was talking, so yeah, it's impossible. I love all the genres, from classical music to rock to jazz to blues to gore trance to name it, basically. One thing though is common in all the songs that I love, and that is I love the songs or music pieces, if it's classical music, that trigger a really deep emotion within me. And that emotion can be either, you know, painful, or it could be inspiring, or it could be healing, or it could be happiness, you know, anything that is just very strong. You know, when you cry of happiness, that type of emotion, or cry of sadness, but music needs to make me feel things really deeply, otherwise I don't like it, or it's just meh. Very, like, you know, the pop songs on the radio, that's not my thing, for example. Or most of them, it's not my thing, because they are just very generic, I'm gonna say. They're not very deep, are they? Sorry, I know you guys out there, I'm sure that you can enjoy this, and that's absolutely fine. I'm just talking about how I perceive music. Anyway, the two decks that represents that powerful, raw emotion that I need my music to make me feel are the Lantern Oracle and the New Era Elements Tarot. And these decks, both of them, made me cry before many times from all the reasons that I said before. It doesn't need to be sadness or sorrow or whatever, or grief. It's different things, and they're just so powerful, both of these decks. I'm just gonna put them both on the table. These two decks make me feel things every single time I use them. They are just so flippin' deep. Both of them. Absolutely incredible. Like, you can't escape their power, their energy. They're very honest as well, so they hit you right there in your heart, in your emotions. They made me feel, like I said, sad, happy, angry, joyful, understood. Understood, that's a big one. Understood. Music that makes you feel understood, that's the one that triggers deep emotion as well, isn't it? So yeah, these two decks are just out of this world. I would put both of them very, very, very high up there on the list of my favorite decks. I've been reading with the New Era Elements Tarot for other people as well, and oh wow, this deck is absolutely spot on and is just incredible. I mean, wow. I feel it's very underrated, this deck. And I know that people talk about it being triggering, which I understand, for example, right? I understand that, or this image here. But it's also facts, you know, what we did as humans to each other and to other beings. This is unfortunately what we did and what we still do to this day. I mean, look at what is going on in the world right now. It's absolutely disgusting what's happening in the Middle East. And I'm not going to go into the details of what my thoughts are on that. It is just so sad that people are dying. It's just so sad. These two decks really hit that spot of emotion and what I search for in the music. So let's move on, otherwise we're gonna stay here forever. The next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite book genre. And, you know, my favorite book genre really changes through my life stages, I'm gonna say, but at the moment, my favorite book genre is non-fiction books that I use for studying tarot. And I chose, well, tarot and other metaphysical things, don't get me wrong, not just tarot. But for that deck I chose Tarot of the Spirit. And this deck is just so packed with information on Kabbalah that if you want to study Kabbalah, this is a really, really great deck. Or Tree of Life, in other words. And yeah, it just represents that genre of books. So yeah, Tarot of the Spirit. I mean, if you buy the books that come with it, they are huge, enormous books. I got both of them. And truthfully, you just need the newest edition of the book, which is called Kabbalah and Tarot of the Spirit. And you have books 1, 2, and 3 within one book, if you buy it in black and white edition, which is completely fine for me, because if you have a deck with you, you don't really need the colors in the books as well. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. The next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite TV show. Now, my favorite TV shows, I have a few, I don't just have one. So these are Doctor Who, Avatar The Last Airbender, the anime show, not the movie type of live action, although that's great as well. Not the movie, the live action series is good. And Dexter is another one. And I don't have any decks that would represent either Doctor Who or Avatar The Last Airbender, so I chose a deck that represents Dexter in some sense. For you who don't know about Dexter, Dexter is about a serial killer who kills bad people, basically. Why did I choose Tarot of the She for that? Well, first of all, for me it's a deck that helps me face things that I need to face. It's a deck that helps me look at my shadow. It is also a very empowering deck, but Dexter, you know, the characters from this show grow so much. Like they develop as characters so deeply, including him. And I feel this deck helps me to grow as a person. Like it helps to empower me, it helps to make me feel good in my skin and in who I am. And by facing your darkness and shadow, you become stronger. And I feel in Dexter there's a lot of that going on. Like people in the show are facing their shadow a lot, and that's why this deck I feel represents that idea really well, because it's happening in Miami and it's very hot there and a lot of sunshine. I feel sunshine I relate obviously to solar plexus chakra, and solar plexus chakra I relate to this deck. So I don't know, that's why it also reminds me of, you know, that. As you can see, lots of yellows, loads and loads of yellows, and that powerful fire sun energy in this deck. So yeah, this is a deck that reminds me of Dexter. Some people would call this deck very dark as well, and that show is very dark, I'm not gonna lie. The next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite pastime. So basically, I suppose me time. And I chose the Herbcrafter's Tarot because what I love doing is exploring plant medicine, connecting to nature, going for walks in nature, in forests, in the parks, if I'm in the city. I love studying this stuff as well. I love finding meanings in every single thing. Like I love signs, if that makes sense. So if I see a rainbow, it means something to me, and I feel this deck has a lot of signs in it. There's like so many little things in it that you could assign a specific energy or meaning to. And that's what I do in life. I love doing that. So this is the deck that, really represents what I love doing in life. Finding meanings, exploring depths in things. I also love using this deck in my past time too and study it. That's why I have my Herb Crafters Tarot series on my channel. I also love filming in my pastime, which is also related to this deck because I am recording the series with this deck. So yeah, there are many layers to why this deck represents my pastime, let's say. So yeah, this is the Herb Crafters Tarot. So for the next one, the prompt is a deck that represents your favorite holiday. Now, there are many holidays that I could put in the category of my favorite, but I couldn't find decks that would fit into that category of those specific holidays. So what I did is I chose a very peculiar holiday. There's a little story that goes with that. So when I was in my early 20s, my best friend won like a thing in the magazine where she could take a person with her to the premiere of The Man of Steel in London. And at that point in my life, I haven't ever been to London. And we went, of course, and it was absolutely amazing. We met Henry Cavill and Hans Zimmer and all those amazing people on the red carpet. It was just incredible. We watched the premiere with the actors and with the creators of the movie. It was just out of this world. This deck is basically happening in the UK, and I feel in London specifically. Maybe it was not intended, but because now I live in London, which is very funny when you think about if I put myself in the shoes of when I think it was 22 when that happened. When I was 22, and if someone told me I'd be living in London in my later adulthood, I wouldn't believe it, basically. I would never ever believe that, because my English was so poor as well at that point. I could barely say anything. Anyhow, the point is that trip was very, I don't know, it changed everything, I suppose, because I put one foot out of my country into a place that I'm really connected to because of the energy of the city, because of different cultures, different religions, different everything. This deck represents that, 100%. The enchantment of every day in the UK. So I could say that trip changed everything for me, I'm gonna say, even though at that point I didn't realize it yet. But now looking back, I know that the passion that I felt for the first time I walked into London did something to my psyche, and it changed me forever. So here we are now. So this is the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Poppy Palin. The next prompt is a deck that represents the decade you were born in. I was born in the 90s. Osho Zen Tarot not only was created in the 94, so in the 90s, but I feel also the art style of this deck is very 90s. If you're born in the 90s, you would probably understand what I'm saying. So this deck is actually my first deck that I ever had. I used it for years, I think for 6 years. For 6 years I was using this deck without realizing it's actually tarot. And I used it as a tarot, not just as oracle. I don't even know why I didn't realize it was tarot, like it says on the box, but I just used it subconsciously. It's very interesting. I think this deck needs to be wiped off and trimmed because, as you can see, it's very worn out. I use it all the time, and I use it for other people as well. I did readings for other people. I know there's a controversy about Osho. I watched a documentary on Netflix that was absolutely amazing and eye-opening. I am not going to comment on it, but I understand why people feel like they can't work with this deck because of what happened. This deck is still very, very different, and the meanings of tarot are very different, but you can definitely make connections to the classical tarot systems. 10 of Water. You would never think maybe that this is 10 of Water, but it makes sense because it is about harmony. It is about emotional harmony, isn't it? So, for example, but yes, this is the deck that is 100% very 90s. The next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite flower. Now, it's impossible for me to choose my favorite flower because I love so many. Like, I love roses, I love irises, I love sunflowers, I love violets, I love so many. Like, I love all the flowers really. So I chose the Soulflower Plant Spirit Oracle. This deck is so good. Oh my gosh. I almost put it in the category of the favorite music genre or song, because this deck makes me feel emotions so much as well. It's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? So beautiful. Look at that. I mean, oh, the art is so vibrant, and watercolors is my favorite medium. The messages in the guidebook and even on the cards are so healing. They're so healing. I love them so much. My gosh. This reminds me of my home because of the forest, and hellebore is one of the first plants that come out in this early spring. Lavender, oh, very blooming lavender as well, which I like. And I'm, like I said before, I'm very connected to the plant world. So this deck is one of my favorite decks of all time. It just connects me, it connects my heart to the spirit, and it grounds me into the earth. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And yeah, it's definitely a deck that represents my favorite flower, which is all the flowers. So yeah, the next prompt is a deck that represents your favorite scent. To me as a person, scent is one of the most important things in the world. Like if someone smells bad, I just can't, like I can't be around them. I just physically, I maybe want to because I love the person or whatever, they're my friend. But if they smell bad, I just can't be next to them. Or on the other side, I love surrounding myself with good smells. And what I mean by good smells is smells that make me feel good. And I have many favorite smells. It was so hard to choose one. So for example, one of my favorite smells is coffee, or when, you know, in the summer when the storm comes and the first drops fall onto the hot concrete, and that smell is just so good. Or the cut grass is one of my favorite smells. But I was struggling to find a deck that would represent that. So what I chose was the Druid Plant Oracle, because smells from nature are my favorite smells as well. So like I said, the cut grass, the flowers, the trees. I can smell the seasons. Can you smell the seasons? Because I can. Like I could open the window and know that the winter is coming, or that the spring is coming, or that the autumn is coming. I don't know. I can smell that. So this oracle represents that in me. So all the scents that come from nature are my favorite scents. When I go for a walk in the forest, I can smell where the mushrooms are, for example. I can smell when the frogs are near. I don't know, I just can. And the smell of water, the spring, the waterfall smell. My brain is wired differently, I suppose. So this deck represents that. I can smell every single card. I would look at it and I would feel the smell. Oh, so beautiful, isn't it? The Guardians, oh my god. Jesus, this deck is just so gorgeous as well, like aesthetically. The smell of juniper is so good. I love it. So yeah, this reminds me, because it's the storm, this reminds me of what I was saying before, of that smell when the water falls onto the concrete. But it does smell, there's a specific smell you can smell, lots of the smell word in this take. The smell that you smell when the raindrops fall on hot rocks as well, for example. I keep on getting these two cards, by the way, in my readings, which is very interesting. Oh, isn't that just beautiful? I could just look at these cards all day long. I just wish there were more of them than 33. That's why I actually put together the plant and the animal one, because there are 33 of each, and together they make like a master deck. But I still have them separately because I like to pull the plant energy separately and the animal energy separately. And sometimes they match, which is very interesting. So many times I pull the arrow and then next to it, it would be the adder. There it is. It would be the adder, like that. Isn't that interesting? So yes, this deck represents my favorite smells. Next prompt is your favorite food. Now, I chose the Animal Totem Tarot. This might be confusing, but I will explain why I chose this. So I eat plant-based diet, and this deck is promoting that, believe it or not. In the guidebook, She often mentions that the plant-based diet is the best diet. And I will give you an example because I was just like, yeah! There we go. For the Queen of Cups mousse, she says, quite literally, this card asks you if you're drinking enough water and eating enough greens. The mousse's diet is important, so pay attention to how many greens you're eating. For example, right, eating greens, but that's not just eating greens. When she describes the Ace of Swords panda, she says, when one is on a plant-based diet, there is no need to count calories. In fact, you can eat what you want when you want it and not have to worry about a thing. Now, this is some healthy information to chew on. Oh my gosh. Because I am huge for animal rights as well. So this deck represents that. It's like, you know, if you love animals and really love them in a way when you don't eat them either. You know, and I'm not saying that everyone should become vegan or anything like that, although it would be lovely and great. You know, it's your choice to eat whoever you want to eat. I'm just saying this deck made me feel very happy. Or the guidebook, let's say, it made me feel very happy when I read those things. And yeah, my favorite food, basically, I didn't even answer the question. My favorite food is anything savory that is plant-based. I love eating, and man, in London specifically, there's so many good plant-based restaurants and they're so amazing. So if you haven't been in Mildred's, go. Even if you're not vegan, you're gonna love it. All my non-vegan friends love that place. So yeah, this is the deck that represents my favorite food, which is plant-based food. And we came to our last prompt, which is a deck that represents your favorite beverage, which is, in other words, a drink that you like. So if you know me, you know that mostly I drink water, but I love anything to do with herbs, or plants. So I would love a herbal tea or a smoothie or a mint water, stuff like that. The Witch's Wisdom Tarot, I don't know, it represents that energy that all these drinks hold. So very earthy, connected to plants type of energy. I know that there are lots of animals in this deck as well, but it still holds that planty energy. What can I say? Herbally, witchy, you know, because witches and plants go hand in hand, right? And plant medicine. So this deck, yeah, it represents perfect for a smoothie. It represents that energy. Let's say mint tea or any type of herbal tea this deck reminds me of. Also just pure water, because there's loads of waters in this deck as well, as you can see. So yes, I love this deck so much. It is so amazing. I think if you felt pushed away from this deck because it has a different system, trust your intuition with it, I'm gonna say. And it speaks volumes. It has so much to say. It is really deep and highly spiritual, but also highly grounding deck. It's perfect. I love it so much. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hit the subscribe button if you like the content I'm creating. If not, then that's fine as well. And thank you again to Feeding My Soul 1212 for creating this fun tag. It was a very great adventure to go through my tarot family and choose the decks that represent different aspects. So that was really fun, and it helped me rewire the associations I have with my decks, I'm gonna say. So I hope you have a wonderful day, night, evening, morning, whatever the time is when you're watching this or where you're watching this, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.